Before this story begins, subscribe to the channel and type love in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. The Boeing 737 sat motionless on the tarmac at Denver International Airport, its massive engines creating a low rhythmic hum that vibrated through the cabin floor and into the bones of the 180 passengers seated within. Flight 2847 to Boston Logan International was already running 47 minutes behind schedule due to an unexpected mechanical inspection that had required ground crews to examine the aircraft's hydraulic systems with meticulous care. The autumn afternoon sun blazed through the small oval windows, casting geometric patterns of golden light across the navy blue carpet that ran down the narrow center aisle where flight attendant Patricia Williams moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been doing this job for nearly 15 years. In seat 14A, positioned perfectly beside the wing where she could watch the ground crews work, 9-year-old Mia Chen pressed her small face against the cool window glass, her breath creating tiny fog circles that she absent-mindedly drew hearts in with her finger. Her glossy black hair was pulled back into 2 perfectly neat braids that her grandmother had taught her to make, each secured with small purple hair ties that matched the hand-knitted cardigan she wore over a simple white t-shirt. Mia's dark brown eyes, inherited from her father's side of the family, sparkled with intelligence and curiosity as she observed the choreographed dance of the ground crew members in their bright orange safety vests, who scurried around the massive aircraft like industrious ants preparing for winter. This was Mia's first solo flight, a milestone that her mother, Dr. Linda Chen, had agreed to only after extensive preparation and countless conversations about safety procedures, emergency protocols, and what to do if anything went wrong. Linda was a highly respected pediatric nurse at Boston Children's Hospital, a woman who had earned her reputation through years of dedication, countless night shifts, and an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under pressure. She had filled Mia's childhood with stories of medical heroics, tales of life and death situations where quick thinking and steady hands had made the difference between tragedy and triumph. Every person has the potential to be a hero, Linda had told her daughter countless times, usually while they sat together in their small but cozy apartment in Cambridge, sharing tea and cookies after school. It's not about being the biggest or the strongest or the oldest. It's about being willing to step forward when someone needs help, even when you're scared. Those words echoed in Mia's mind now as she sat alone on this airplane, traveling to spend 2 weeks with her paternal grandmother in Denver, while her mother attended a crucial medical conference in Seattle. The 9-year-old carried herself with a quiet confidence that seemed unusual for someone so young, a composure born from years of listening to her mother's experiences and absorbing lessons about compassion, courage, and the fundamental responsibility that each person has to help others in need. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez speaking from the flight deck. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom system, cutting through the low murmur of passenger conversations and the rustling of magazines. We sincerely apologize for the continued delay this afternoon. Our maintenance team has completed their inspection of the aircraft, and I'm pleased to report that everything is in perfect working order. We're currently number 3 in line for takeoff, and air traffic control estimates will be airborne within the next 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you for your patience, and we'll have you in Boston right on schedule despite this delay. The announcement was met with a mixture of relieved sighs and frustrated groans from passengers who had connecting flights to catch, important meetings to attend, or simply wanted to get home after long business trips. Some pulled out their phones to send updates to people waiting for them, while others settled back into their seats with resigned acceptance of the situation. 8 rows ahead of Mia, in the slightly more spacious comfort of seat 8C, 35-year-old Victoria Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her manicured hand instinctively moving to rest on her prominently rounded belly. At 8 months and 1 week pregnant, Victoria was carrying what her doctor had assured her was a perfectly healthy baby boy, whom she and her husband had already decided to name James Christopher Reynolds, after his paternal grandfather. Her shoulder-length blonde hair, usually styled in the sophisticated waves that befitted her position as a senior marketing executive, now felt limp and uncomfortable against her neck in the dry airplane air. Victoria was returning from what was supposed to be her final business trip before maternity leave, a 3-day digital marketing conference in Denver that had been both exhausting and exhilarating. As the head of marketing for a boutique consulting firm that specialized in helping small businesses establish their online presence, she had been working twice as hard over the past few months to ensure that all her projects were completed, and her team was fully prepared to handle her absence during maternity leave. Her husband, Christopher Reynolds, was the CEO and founder of Reynolds Innovation Group, a technology company that had grown from a two-person startup in their garage to a multi-million-dollar enterprise with offices in Boston, New York, and Austin. Despite his demanding schedule, Christopher had been incredibly supportive throughout the pregnancy, attending every doctor's appointment he could manage and reading more pregnancy books than Victoria herself had managed to get through. The couple lived in a beautiful brownstone in Boston's historic Back Bay neighborhood, a home they had purchased 3 years earlier with dreams of filling it with children and laughter. The nursery was already complete, painted in soft shades of blue and green with hand-painted woodland creatures dancing across the walls. A rocking chair that had belonged to Christopher's grandmother, positioned perfectly beside the crib, where Victoria planned to spend countless hours feeding and rocking their son. Victoria had felt slightly off all morning, experiencing what she initially attributed to the usual discomforts of late pregnancy combined with the stress of travel. There had been a persistent dull backache that seemed to wrap around her sides like an uncomfortable belt, and occasional cramping in her lower abdomen that she had dismissed as Braxton Hicks contractions, the practice contractions that her doctor had warned her about. Dr. Sarah Martinez, her obstetrician, had cleared her for this trip with the confident assurance that first-time mothers almost never delivered before their due date, especially not at 36 weeks in one day. "You'll probably go a week or two past your due date," Dr. Martinez had said with a knowing smile during Victoria's last appointment. "First babies like to take their time. You'll be back from Denver with weeks to spare." But now, sitting in this airplane seat with the unfamiliar sensations growing stronger and more frequent, Victoria was beginning to wonder if her doctor's confidence had been misplaced. The cramping was becoming more regular, more intense, and there was a pressure in her pelvis that felt different from anything she had experienced before. She tried to shift positions, to find some relief, but the narrow airplane seat offered little room for maneuvering. The businessman sitting in 8B, a stern-looking man in his 50s who had been typing furiously on his laptop since before they boarded, glanced over with mild irritation as Victoria struggled to get comfortable. He had the look of someone who traveled frequently for work and had little patience for disruptions to his routine, someone who viewed air travel as simply a necessary inconvenience to be endured while he continued working. Victoria forced a polite smile and tried to settle back into her seat, but another wave of pressure swept through her abdomen, this one stronger than the last. She placed both hands on her belly and took a deep breath, trying to remember the relaxation techniques she had learned in her prenatal classes. The sensation passed after about 30 seconds, leaving her feeling slightly breathless and increasingly concerned. "Breathe, Victoria," she whispered to herself, using the self-talk techniques her birthing instructor had taught her. "This is just your body preparing. Everything is fine. The baby isn't coming for another month." But even as she spoke the words, some primal instinct deep within her body was sending different signals, ancient wisdom that had nothing to do with medical predictions or due dates and everything to do with the undeniable reality of what was beginning to happen within her. The airplane's engine suddenly roared to life with increased intensity, signaling that their wait was nearly over. Through the windows, passengers could see other aircraft taxiing toward the runway, the organized chaos of a busy airport in full swing. Flight attendants began their final safety checks, ensuring that overhead bins were securely latched and that passengers had their seatbelts fastened for departure. Victoria reached for her seatbelt, struggling slightly to fasten it around her expanded belly, when another contraction hit her with a force that made her gasp audibly. This time, there was no mistaking the sensation for anything other than what it was. Her body was preparing to bring her son into the world, whether she was ready or not, whether she was in a hospital or an airplane, whether it was convenient or catastrophic. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This was really happening. Her baby was coming now, here, 30,000 feet above the ground with no doctor, no hospital, and no way to stop what nature had decided to begin. "Excuse me, miss?" Victoria called out to Patricia Williams, who was checking the overhead bin latches 2 rows ahead. Her voice carried a note of barely controlled panic that immediately caught the flight attendant's attention. Patricia, a woman in her early 40s with graying brown hair pulled back in the regulation bun required by airline policy, had seen her share of medical emergencies over the years, but something in Victoria's tone made her stop what she was doing and hurry over immediately. "What can I help you with, honey?" Patricia asked, kneeling in the aisle beside Victoria's seat. Her training had taught her to assess passengers quickly, and she could immediately see that this woman was in distress. Victoria's face had gone pale except for 2 bright spots of color on her cheeks, and there was a sheen of perspiration on her forehead despite the cool cabin temperature. I think I might be having contractions," Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible above the increasing engine noise as the aircraft prepared for takeoff. "But that's impossible. I'm not due for another month. This can't be real labor." Patricia's expression shifted immediately from routine customer service to focused professional concern. She had received extensive training in medical emergencies, including a basic course in emergency childbirth, but she had never actually faced the reality of a woman in labor at 37,000 feet. The theoretical knowledge felt woefully inadequate when confronted with the real thing. "How far along are you in your pregnancy?" Patricia asked, pulling out her small notepad to document the situation. 36 weeks and 1 day, Victoria replied, gripping the armrest as another wave of pain rolled through her abdomen. "My doctor said first babies almost never come early. This has to be false labor. Please tell me this is false labor." Patricia looked at her watch and made a note of the time. "When did the contractions start?" "About 30 minutes ago, maybe a little longer. They're getting stronger and closer together." Victoria's breathing was becoming more rapid and shallow as she spoke. "At first I thought it was just the usual pregnancy discomfort, but this feels different. This feels real." The flight attendant's mind raced through the emergency protocols she had memorized during her training. They were still on the ground, which meant they could potentially return to the gate and get Victoria to a hospital. But they were also cleared for takeoff and third in line for the runway. Delaying now would create a cascade of scheduling problems that would ripple through the entire airline system, affecting hundreds of other passengers and costing the company thousands of dollars in delays and missed connections. More immediately concerning was the fact that Patricia's emergency medical training, while comprehensive in many areas, had covered childbirth in only the most basic terms. She knew to keep the mother calm, to have her lie down if possible, and to call for medical assistance, but the reality of actually delivering a baby seemed impossibly complex and terrifying. "Let me contact the captain and see what our options are," Patricia said, reaching for her communication device. "In the meantime, try to stay calm and breathe slowly." But before she could make the call, Victoria's entire body seized with a contraction so powerful and overwhelming that she cried out in pain, a sound that cut through the cabin noise like a siren and caused every head within 3 rows to turn in their direction. The businessman beside her scooted away as far as his seat would allow, clearly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding next to him. "Oh God," Victoria gasped, tears beginning to stream down her face. "Something's wrong. This hurts too much. It's too intense. Something must be wrong with the baby." Patricia pressed the call button for the cockpit while scanning the cabin with growing desperation. "Is there a doctor on board?" she called out loudly enough for most of the passengers to hear. "We have a medical emergency and need immediate assistance." A ripple of concern and curiosity moved through the cabin as passengers looked around at each other, waiting for someone to volunteer. After several tense seconds, a woman in her 50s raised her hand from a seat near the back of the plane. "I'm a veterinarian," she called out. "I've delivered plenty of babies, but they were all puppies and kittens." A few nervous chuckles greeted this announcement, but Patricia felt her heart sink. While any medical training was better than none, she couldn't help but think that the differences between delivering a human baby and animal offspring might be significant enough to matter. "Anyone else?" Patricia called out again, but the cabin remained silent except for the growing murmur of concerned conversations as passengers began to realize that something serious was happening. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through Patricia's headset. "What's the situation back there, Patricia?" "We have a passenger in active labor, Captain. She's 36 weeks pregnant and the contractions are getting very intense and frequent." Any medical personnel on board? Only a veterinarian, sir. There was a brief pause as Captain Rodriguez consulted with his co-pilot and considered their options. We're currently number 2 for takeoff. If we abort now and return to the gate, we're looking at least another 2-hour delay while we get medical personnel on board and potentially offload the passenger. What's your assessment of the urgency? Patricia looked at Victoria, who was gripping the armrests of her seat so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The pregnant woman's breathing had become erratic, and there was something in her expression, a primal, ancient recognition, that told Patricia this wasn't a false alarm or something that could be managed with breathing exercises and reassurance. I think this baby is coming whether we're on the ground or in the air, Captain, Patricia replied. And if that's the case, we might as well be en route to Boston where her husband and her doctor are waiting. Understood. Stand by for takeoff. Do your best to keep her comfortable, and let me know immediately if the situation changes. Patricia ended the communication and turned back to Victoria, who was now breathing in short, rapid gasps as another contraction built to its peak. Around them, other passengers had begun to take notice of the situation. Some were standing in the aisle trying to get a better look, while others were pulling out their cell phones to capture what they sensed might be an extraordinary event. Ma'am, what's your name? Patricia asked, taking Victoria's hand in an attempt to provide some comfort. Victoria Reynolds, she managed to say between breaths. My husband is Christopher Reynolds. He's the CEO of Reynolds Innovation Group in Boston. He's expecting me to call when we land. Victoria, I need you to try to stay as calm as possible. We're going to take off as scheduled and get you to Boston where your husband and your medical team can take care of you. This might be false labor and everything might settle down once we're in the air. But even as Patricia spoke the words, she could see in Victoria's eyes that both of them knew this was wishful thinking. The contractions were coming every 3 to 4 minutes now, lasting nearly a minute each time and growing stronger with each wave. This was textbook active labor, and if Patricia remembered correctly from her emergency training, that meant the baby could arrive anywhere from 1 hour to 12 hours from now. Given that they had a 3.5-hour flight ahead of them, the mathematics were not encouraging. The baby! Victoria suddenly screamed, her voice filled with terror and pain. Oh God, something's happening. I can feel him moving down. He's coming. The words sent a shock wave through the passengers within earshot. This wasn't just a woman having some discomfort during pregnancy. This was a woman about to give birth. Right here, right now, in an airplane seat while they sat on a runway waiting for clearance to take off. Patricia felt her professional composure begin to crack as the full reality of the situation hit her. She was potentially about to witness a birth, possibly assist in one, and she had absolutely no idea what to do beyond the most basic first aid measures. The emergency manual covered how to handle heart attacks, seizures, and allergic reactions, but it devoted exactly 2 paragraphs to emergency childbirth, both of which basically said to keep the mother calm and get professional medical help as quickly as possible. Everyone please remain in your seats. Patricia called out to the growing crowd of passengers who had stood up to see what was happening. We have the situation under control. But she didn't have the situation under control, and everyone within 3 rows could see that. The other flight attendants were trying to maintain order in the rest of the cabin, but near Victoria's seat, chaos was beginning to reign. Adult passengers stood frozen, some covering their eyes as if they could make the situation disappear, others holding up their phones to record what they sensed might be a once-in-a-lifetime event. A few well-meaning people offered suggestions like, breathe deeply, or try to relax, but no one seemed to know what to actually do. The businessman in 8B had gone pale green and was pressing himself against the window, as if he could somehow escape through the glass. An elderly woman across the aisle had begun praying audibly in what sounded like Italian, while a young mother with a toddler was trying to shield her child's eyes from the scene unfolding before them. I can't do this, Victoria sobbed, her composure completely shattered. Not here. Not like this. Where's a doctor? Why isn't there a doctor? Patricia knelt beside Victoria's seat, feeling completely helpless despite all her training and years of experience handling difficult situations. She had dealt with drunk passengers, medical emergencies, and even a hijacking attempt early in her career. But nothing had prepared her for this moment when a new life was about to enter the world, and she was the closest thing to a medical professional available. I need help. Patricia whispered to herself, and that's when she heard a small, clear voice cut through the chaos and panic like a knife through butter. "I can help her." Everyone turned to see Mia Chen standing in the aisle beside row 14, her small frame dwarfed by the towering adults around her. At 9 years old, she barely reached most passengers' shoulders, but there was something in her posture, a quiet determination and confidence that commanded immediate attention. Her dark eyes were calm and focused, completely unafraid of the crisis unfolding before her. "Sweetie, you need to sit down and fasten your seatbelt," Patricia said gently but firmly, her training telling her that children should be protected from traumatic situations. "This isn't something for little girls to see. Go back to your seat." "My mother is Dr. Linda Chen," Mia said, stepping closer to Victoria's seat with the purposeful stride of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "She's a pediatric nurse at Boston Children's Hospital. She worked in the emergency department during Hurricane Katrina when the hospital was flooded and the power was out. She delivered 17 babies during that storm when all the doctors were trapped in other parts of the hospital." The adults exchanged uncertain glances. A 9-year-old girl offering to help deliver a baby seemed not just absurd, but potentially dangerous. But as Victoria screamed again, and as the terrible reality sank in that none of the adults had any idea what to do, Mia's offer began to seem less ridiculous and more like a lifeline thrown to drowning people. "She taught me emergency procedures," Mia continued, her voice steady and clear despite the chaos around her. "She said you never know when someone might need help and there's no medical professional around. She made me memorize what to do in situations like this." Victoria looked at the small girl through her pain and panic and saw something that all the adults had missed, a calm competence and confidence that seemed impossible for someone so young, but unmistakably real. In her desperation and terror, she reached out and grasped Mia's small, warm hand. "Please," Victoria whispered, her voice breaking. "If you know how to help, please help me. I'm so scared." Patricia looked from Victoria to Mia and back again, her mind racing through their options. They had no doctor, no nurse, no one with any obstetric experience except for a veterinarian who specialized in house pets. The airplane was about to take off, which meant they would be airborne for the next 3.5 hours, with no possibility of emergency medical assistance. If this baby was really coming, and all signs pointed to that reality, they needed someone, anyone, who had some idea of what to do. "What exactly did your mother teach you?" Patricia asked Mia, still not entirely convinced that relying on a 9-year-old was anything other than desperation masquerading as a plan. "Everything," Mia replied with the simple confidence that only children possess. "How to check if the baby is positioned correctly, how to help the mother breathe and push, how to clear the baby's airway, how to cut the umbilical cord, and how to make sure both the mother and baby are safe afterward." She said knowledge is only useful if you're brave enough to use it when someone needs you. The airplane engine suddenly roared to maximum power as Captain Rodriguez received clearance for takeoff. Through the windows, passengers could see the ground beginning to move past them as the aircraft started its acceleration down the runway. In a matter of minutes, they would be airborne with no possibility of turning back, no chance of getting Victoria to a hospital, and no option but to deal with whatever happened next with the resources they had on board. "I'll do whatever you think is best," Patricia said to Mia, making a decision that went against every protocol and regulation she had ever learned. "But we need to move fast. Tell me what you need." And in that moment, as the Boeing 737 lifted off the runway and climbed into the autumn sky above Denver, a 9-year-old girl prepared to do what no adult around her felt capable of doing, bringing new life into the world at 37,000 feet above the ground. Armed with nothing but the knowledge her mother had shared, and the courage to act when everyone else was paralyzed by fear. The real test of everything Linda Chen had taught her daughter was about to begin. "Everybody step back and give us room to work," Mia commanded with an authority that seemed to emanate from somewhere far deeper than her 9 years should have allowed. The adults surrounding Victoria's seat, who had been milling about in various states of panic and helplessness, actually obeyed the small girl's instruction, creating a circle of space around the laboring woman. Patricia watched in amazement as Mia immediately began taking charge of the situation, with medical precision that would have been impressive coming from a trained professional, let alone a fourth grader. The little girl's transformation from ordinary child to emergency responder was so complete and sudden that it seemed almost surreal. "First, we need supplies," Mia said, turning to Patricia with the focused intensity of a battlefield commander. "I need clean blankets, as many as you can find. Hot water from the galley, as hot as you can safely get it without scalding anyone. Clean towels, preferably white ones if you have them. Do you have any antiseptic wipes or alcohol-based hand sanitizer?" "How do you possibly know all of this?" Patricia whispered. But she was already signaling to the other flight attendants to begin gathering the requested items. "My mom didn't just tell me stories about emergencies," Mia replied, kneeling beside Victoria's seat and taking the frightened woman's hand in both of her small ones. "She made me practice. She said that someday someone might need help when there's no doctor or nurse around, and if I had the knowledge to help them, it would be wrong not to use it." Mia's touch seemed to have an almost magical effect on Victoria, whose panicked breathing began to slow slightly. There was something about the child's calm presence that conveyed safety and competence in a way that all the adult's anxious reassurances had failed to achieve. "Ma'am, what's your full name?" Mia asked Victoria, her voice gentle but professional. "Victoria Elizabeth Reynolds," she gasped between contractions. "My baby. His name is going to be James Christopher Reynolds. We picked it out months ago." "That's a beautiful name," Mia said with a warm smile that momentarily broke through her serious demeanor. "Victoria, I'm Mia Chen, and I'm going to help you and James through this. But I need you to trust me and do exactly what I tell you, okay? Can you do that?" Victoria nodded, tears streaming down her face. But for the first time since the contractions had begun, she felt a flicker of genuine hope. This child, this impossibly young girl, radiated a confidence and competence that none of the adults had possessed. It defied logic and challenged everything Victoria thought she knew about the world, but in her desperation, she was willing to trust her life and her baby's life to someone who seemed to actually know what she was doing. "How long have your contractions been coming?" Mia asked, automatically checking Victoria's pulse at her wrist while maintaining eye contact. "About an hour now, maybe a little longer. They're coming every 2 or 3 minutes and lasting about a minute each time. And this is your first baby?" "Yes." "My doctor said first babies almost never come early, especially not this early." Mia nodded thoughtfully. "Dr. Martinez is probably right about most first babies, but every baby is different. Some babies decide they're ready to meet the world on their own timeline, regardless of what the calendar says." The fact that Mia somehow knew Victoria's doctor's name sent a chill through the cabin. Several passengers exchanged glances, wondering how a 9-year-old could possibly know such specific information. But Mia had simply made an educated guess based on the common names used by obstetricians, and her confidence had made it seem like specialized knowledge. Patricia returned with the supplies Mia had requested, along with Sarah Henderson, the veterinarian who had volunteered earlier. Sarah looked skeptical about taking medical direction from a child, but the desperate circumstances had left them with few alternatives. "I'm Dr. Henderson," Sarah introduced herself to Mia. "I specialize in small animal medicine, but I've delivered hundreds of babies. They were puppies and kittens, but the basic principles should be similar." "Thank you for offering to help, Dr. Henderson," Mia replied politely but firmly. "But human birth is different from animal birth in some important ways. If it's okay with you, I'd like to take the lead on this, and you can assist me if I need help." The idea of a veterinarian taking direction from a 9-year-old should have been absurd, but something in Mia's demeanor convinced Sarah to step back and observe. The child's knowledge and confidence were so genuine that they overrode the logical objections that adult minds wanted to raise. "Victoria, I need to check how dilated you are," Mia said matter-of-factly. "Dr. Henderson, could you help me position some blankets for privacy?" "Wait," Patricia interjected. "Are you sure you know how to do that? I mean, you're just a little girl." "My mother is a pediatric nurse," Mia replied patiently. "She's assisted in hundreds of deliveries. She taught me how to check cervical dilation because she said it's one of the most important things to know in an emergency situation. If the cervix isn't fully dilated, trying to push can be dangerous for both the mother and the baby." The clinical language coming from someone who probably still had bedtime stories read to her was jarring. But Mia's explanations were so clear and logical that the adults found themselves accepting her expertise despite its impossible source. "The baby is crowning," Victoria suddenly screamed, her voice filled with terror and excitement. "I can feel his head. Oh God, he's coming right now." Mia immediately moved into position while Dr. Henderson and Patricia held blankets to provide some privacy from the dozens of passengers who were craning their necks to see what was happening. The 9-year-old's small hands moved with surprising steadiness and confidence as she assessed the situation. "I can see the top of his head," Mia announced, her young voice filled with wonder and excitement. "He has dark hair just like yours, Victoria. He's positioned perfectly. This is going to be a textbook delivery." The airplane hit a patch of turbulence at that moment, causing several passengers to gasp as the aircraft bounced and swayed. But Mia remained perfectly steady, her focus unshakable despite the unusual circumstances. "Victoria, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Mia said, her voice calm and authoritative. "On the next contraction, I want you to push, but not too hard. Let your body do most of the work. Don't hold your breath. Keep breathing and push gently but steadily." "I can't do this," Victoria sobbed. "It hurts too much. What if something goes wrong? What if I hurt him?" "You're not going to hurt him," Mia assured her with absolute conviction. "Your body knows exactly what to do. Women have been having babies for thousands of years, long before there were hospitals and doctors. You have everything inside you that you need to bring James safely into the world." The businessman who had been sitting next to Victoria was now pressed against the opposite wall of the cabin, his face pale green with nausea. Other passengers had their phones out, some recording what they sensed might be a historic moment, others texting family members to describe the incredible scene unfolding before them. "Here comes another contraction," Victoria announced, and Mia immediately focused all her attention on the task at hand. "Perfect. Now push, Victoria. Gentle but steady pressure. I can see more of his head now." The cabin filled with the sounds of Victoria's labored breathing and occasional cries of pain, punctuated by Mia's calm, steady instructions and words of encouragement. Captain Rodriguez announced over the intercom that they had reached cruising altitude and that passengers were free to move about the cabin, but nobody in the immediate vicinity was thinking about anything other than the miracle that was taking place in Seat 8C. "His head is almost completely out," Mia reported, her voice tight with concentration. "One more push should do it for the head, and then we'll wait for the shoulders to rotate." Victoria summoned every ounce of strength and determination she possessed and pushed with everything she had. Suddenly, with a rush of fluid and warmth, baby James's head emerged completely into Mia's waiting hands. "Oh my God," Dr. Henderson whispered, her skepticism completely evaporated. "She actually knows what she's doing." "Don't touch his head," Mia instructed Victoria. "Let me clear his airway first." The 9-year-old quickly but carefully used a clean towel to wipe the baby's face and mouth, checking to ensure that his breathing passages were clear. "His color is good, and I can see him trying to breathe. That's exactly what we want." The cabin had fallen completely silent except for the drone of the engines and Victoria's heavy breathing. Even the passengers several rows away had stopped their conversations to listen to the drama unfolding in the front of the cabin. "Now we wait for the shoulders to rotate," Mia explained, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was handling. "This is the most important part, Victoria. We can't rush it. The baby needs to turn himself into the right position." After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, Mia felt the baby's shoulders begin to move. "Here we go. Victoria, I need one more big push. This is it. James is ready to meet his mommy." Victoria gathered her remaining strength and pushed with every fiber of her being. Suddenly, in a rush of warmth and motion, baby James Christopher Reynolds slipped completely into Mia's small but steady hands. The airplane cabin erupted with the sound of a strong, healthy cry that seemed impossibly loud and beautiful in the enclosed space. "It's a boy," Mia announced unnecessarily, since Victoria already knew, but the traditional announcement brought tears to eyes throughout the cabin. "He's absolutely perfect, Victoria. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and he's breathing beautifully." The entire cabin burst into spontaneous applause, a sound that mixed joy, relief, and amazement in equal measure. Passengers who had been recording the event stopped to wipe tears from their eyes, while others called out congratulations and words of encouragement. Patricia radioed the cockpit with the news, and Captain Rodriguez's voice soon filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm tremendously proud to announce that we have our newest passenger aboard Flight 2847. Mother and baby are both doing perfectly, thanks to the absolutely heroic actions of a very special young lady. Please join me in giving them all a round of applause." The applause was even louder the second time, mixed with cheers and whistles from passengers who were witnessing something they would never forget. Several people were openly crying, overwhelmed by the beauty and miracle of what they had just seen. Mia quickly but carefully cleaned baby James with the warm towels Patricia had provided, her movements confident and sure despite her age. She checked his breathing, his color, and his reflexes, nodding with satisfaction at what she saw. "He's absolutely healthy," she reported to Victoria, carefully placing the baby on his mother's chest and covering them both with warm blankets. "His breathing is strong, his color is perfect, and he's already trying to look around. He's going to be just fine." Victoria looked down at her son with tears of joy streaming down her face, then turned to the little girl who had just changed her life forever. "Mia, how can I ever thank you? You saved us both. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." "My mom always says that helping people isn't about getting thanked," Mia replied with a smile that was pure childhood innocence. "It's about doing what's right when someone needs you. Besides, you did all the hard work. I just helped a little bit." Dr. Henderson approached Mia with a look of profound respect. "That was absolutely remarkable," she said quietly. "I've delivered hundreds of babies, and I've never seen anyone handle an emergency birth with more skill and composure. Your mother must be an extraordinary teacher." "She is," Mia agreed proudly. "She says that knowledge is only valuable if you're brave enough to use it to help other people." As the airplane continued its journey toward Boston, carrying its precious new passenger, none of them knew that this extraordinary event was just the beginning of a story that would bind their lives together in ways they could never have imagined. The baby who had just entered the world in the most unusual circumstances was about to become the catalyst for discoveries, revelations, and transformations that would change everything for everyone involved. But for now, in this moment suspended high above the clouds, there was only the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, the miracle of new life, and the knowledge that sometimes the most unlikely heroes come in the smallest packages. The real journey was just beginning, and none of them could have predicted where it would lead. The remainder of the flight passed in a surreal bubble of calm after the dramatic intensity of baby James's arrival. Victoria lay reclined in her seat, with her newborn son sleeping peacefully on her chest, both of them covered in soft airline blankets that Patricia had warmed in the galley's warming oven. The baby's tiny fingers were curled into perfect fists, and his breathing was steady and strong, creating small puffs of warmth against his mother's neck. Every few minutes, Victoria would look down at him with a mixture of disbelief, overwhelming love, and gratitude that seemed to radiate from her very core. Mia had returned to her own seat at the insistence of the flight crew, but she checked on Victoria and James every 20 minutes, approaching with the professional demeanor of a medical practitioner making rounds. Each time she visited, she would quietly assess the baby's color, breathing, and alertness, and ask Victoria about her own recovery, pain levels, and any concerns she might have. The other passengers watched these interactions with a mixture of amazement and curiosity, still struggling to process what they had witnessed. "How is she so calm?" whispered Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, an elderly woman in seat 12A who had been watching Mia's post-delivery care with fascination. "When I was 9 years old, I would have been hiding under my seat after something like that." Her seatmate, a middle-aged teacher named Robert Kim, shook his head in wonder. "I've been teaching 4th grade for 23 years. And I've never seen a child with that level of composure and knowledge. It's almost supernatural." Throughout the cabin, similar conversations were taking place as passengers tried to make sense of what they had experienced. Many had recorded portions of the delivery on their phones, and several were already composing social media posts about the miracle girl who had delivered a baby at 37,000 feet. The hashtag #OurAngelAtAltitude was already beginning to trend on various platforms as news of the extraordinary event began to spread beyond the confines of Flight 2847. Captain Rodriguez had radioed ahead to Boston Logan International Airport, alerting medical personnel to meet the aircraft upon arrival. An ambulance crew would be standing by to transport Victoria and James to Massachusetts General Hospital for post-delivery evaluation, and arrangements had been made to expedite the passengers' disembarking process so that the new mother and baby could receive immediate medical attention. As they began their descent into Boston, Patricia approached Mia's seat with a clipboard and a somewhat sheepish expression. "Mia, I need to ask you some questions for my incident report," she said quietly. "The airline requires detailed documentation whenever there's a medical emergency on board." "Of course," Mia replied, looking up from the book she had been reading, an advanced biology textbook that seemed far beyond fourth grade level. "What do you need to know?" "First, I need your mother's full name and contact information. The airline will want to verify your medical knowledge and possibly recommend her for some kind of recognition. Her name is Dr. Linda Chen, and she works at Boston Children's Hospital. She's been back from her conference in Seattle for 2 days now, so she's probably at work today." Patricia made notes on her clipboard. "And you said she taught you emergency delivery procedures?" "She taught me lots of emergency procedures," Mia corrected gently. "Emergency childbirth was just one of them. She also taught me how to handle cardiac emergencies, allergic reactions, choking incidents, and basic trauma care. She said you never know when someone might need help and there won't be a medical professional around." "Has she taught other children these procedures?" Mia shook her head. "Just me. She says I have a special aptitude for medical knowledge and that I stay calm under pressure. She's been teaching me since I was 6 years old." Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. 3 years of medical training for a child who was now 9 years old? It seemed almost too incredible to believe, yet she had witnessed the results firsthand. Mia's knowledge and skill had been undeniably real and effective. "One more question," Patricia said. "Have you ever actually assisted in a delivery before today?" "No," Mia admitted. "But my mom made me practice the procedures dozens of times using medical simulation dolls at the hospital. She said that practice makes perfect, and that someday I might need to use what I learned to help someone." As the airplane touched down at Boston Logan, Victoria felt her heart rate increase with anticipation and anxiety. In just a few minutes, she would be reunited with Christopher, who had no idea that he was about to meet his son nearly a month earlier than expected, and under circumstances that he would never believe. She had managed to send him a brief text message during the flight. "Baby coming early, landing soon, we're both fine, long story." But she hadn't elaborated on the details, knowing that the full explanation would require a face-to-face conversation. The aircraft taxied to the gate, and Patricia made an announcement over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at Boston Logan International Airport. Please remain seated while we allow our special passengers to disembark first. Medical personnel are standing by to assist them, and we ask for your patience and cooperation during this process." As the airplane door opened, a team of paramedics entered the cabin with a wheelchair and portable medical equipment. The lead paramedic, a woman named Sarah Martinez, who happened to share a name with Victoria's obstetrician, approached Victoria's seat with professional efficiency. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm Sarah Martinez, one of the paramedics here to assist you. How are you feeling?" "Tired but fine," Victoria replied. "The baby is perfect. A little girl named Mia delivered him during the flight, and she took incredible care of both of us." Sarah looked around the cabin. "Where is this Mia? We'd like to thank her and possibly get some information about the delivery for our medical report." Patricia pointed to Mia's seat, and Sarah approached the 9-year-old with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. But as Mia began to describe the delivery process in precise medical terminology, explaining the baby's presentation, the duration of each stage of labor, and the post-delivery care she had provided, Sarah's skepticism quickly transformed into amazement. "This child knows more about emergency obstetrics than some of the medical students I work with," Sarah whispered to her partner. "How is that possible?" As Victoria and James were carefully transferred to the wheelchair and prepared for transport to the hospital, Victoria reached out and took Mia's hand one more time. "I will never forget what you did for us today," she said. tears beginning to form in her eyes again. "You gave me my son and probably saved both our lives. How can I ever repay you?" "You don't need to repay me," Mia replied with the same simple sincerity she had shown throughout the crisis. "Just take good care of James and be happy. That's all the payment I need." But as Victoria was wheeled off the airplane and toward the waiting ambulance, neither she nor Mia could have imagined that their lives had become intertwined in ways that went far beyond the extraordinary circumstances of James's birth. The connections between them ran deeper than either could have guessed, and the truth that would eventually emerge would change everything for both families. Christopher Reynolds was pacing anxiously in the terminal when he saw the ambulance crew wheeling Victoria toward the exit. His tall frame and expensively tailored suit marked him immediately as someone of importance, and his expression of worry and confusion was evident to everyone around him. "Victoria," he called out, rushing toward them. "What happened? Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" "We're both perfect," Victoria said, pulling back the blanket to reveal their sleeping son. "Christopher, meet James Christopher Reynolds." He decided he couldn't wait any longer to meet his daddy. Christopher's face went through a series of emotions: shock, joy, amazement, and overwhelming love, as he looked at his son for the first time. "He's beautiful," he whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "But how? Why? You were supposed to have another month." "I'll explain everything at the hospital," Victoria promised. "But Chris, you're not going to believe what happened on that airplane. There was this little girl." As the ambulance drove toward Massachusetts General Hospital, with Christopher following in his Mercedes, Victoria began to tell the story of Mia Chen, the 9-year-old who had delivered their son with skill and composure that defied explanation. With each detail she shared, Christopher's expression grew more amazed and incredulous. "A 9-year-old delivered our son?" He repeated several times as if saying the words might make them seem more believable. "Victoria, are you sure you weren't hallucinating from the pain?" "There was no pain medication, Chris. And I wasn't hallucinating. This little girl knew exactly what she was doing. She was like a tiny doctor, completely calm and professional, if she hadn't been there." Victoria's voice trailed off as she considered what might have happened if Mia hadn't stepped forward. "We need to find this girl," Christopher said firmly. "We need to thank her properly and make sure she knows how grateful we are." Christopher Reynolds was a man accustomed to solving problems with resources and determination, but he had no idea that his search for Mia Chen would lead him down a path of discovery that would reveal unexpected connections to his own past. What seemed like a simple expression of gratitude was about to become something much more complex and life-changing. Meanwhile, across the city in a modest apartment in Cambridge, Mia Chen was finishing her homework at the kitchen table, while her mother prepared dinner in the adjoining kitchen. Linda had been home from her conference for 2 days, and she had been looking forward to hearing about Mia's flight and her time with her grandmother in Denver. "How was your flight, sweetheart?" Linda asked as she chopped vegetables for their dinner. "Did everything go smoothly?" Mia looked up from her math problems with an expression that Linda had learned to recognize over the years. It was the look her daughter got when something significant had happened, something that required careful explanation. "Mom, something happened on the plane," Mia said quietly. "Something important thing." Linda immediately set down her knife and turned to face her daughter, giving her full attention. "What kind of something?" "A lady went into labor during the flight, and none of the adults knew what to do. So I helped her. I delivered her baby." Linda felt the blood drain from her face as she processed what her daughter had just told her. "You did what?" "I delivered a baby, Mom, just like you taught me. A little boy named James. The mother's name was Victoria Reynolds, and she said her husband's name is Christopher Reynolds. He owns a company called Reynolds Innovation Group." At the mention of the name Reynolds, Linda felt her legs go weak and she had to grip the edge of the counter for support. After 18 months of carefully maintained secrecy, after building a new life in Boston while keeping the painful past safely buried, that name had suddenly crashed back into their world in the most unexpected way possible. "Are you sure about the name?" Linda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Positive. The lady said it several times, and the paramedics called him Mr. Reynolds when he met us at the airport." "Mom, why do you look like that? Do you know him?" Linda looked at her daughter's innocent face and felt the weight of nearly a decade of carefully maintained secrets pressing down on her like a physical force. She had always known that someday she would have to tell Mia the truth about her father, but she had imagined it happening gradually, when Mia was older and could better understand the complexities of adult relationships and the difficult choices that sometimes have to be made. She had never imagined that the truth would reveal itself in such a dramatic and public way, with Mia unknowingly saving the life of her own nephew while the world watched and recorded the event for posterity. "Mia," Linda said, sitting down at the kitchen table and taking her daughter's hands in her own, "there are some things about our family that I haven't told you yet. Things about your father." "Is my father alive?" Mia asked directly, the same straightforward approach she had used during the medical emergency on the airplane. Linda took a deep breath, knowing that the next words would change everything between them. "No, sweetheart, your father died 18 months ago. He had been sick for a while, but I didn't want to burden you with that sadness while you were so young." 18 months? Mia repeated, her mathematical mind immediately processing the timeline. "But Mom, you told me he had died years ago when I asked about him before." Linda felt her heart break as she realized she had been caught in her own protective lies. "I'm sorry, Mia. I thought it would be easier for you if you believed he had died when you were very small, so you wouldn't feel the loss as much. But he actually died in early 2022 when you were 7. So he was alive for most of my life?" "Yes. And I never got to meet him?" "No, sweetheart, it was complicated." Mia sat quietly for several minutes, processing this revelation with the same calm acceptance she had shown throughout the airplane crisis, though Linda could see the wheels turning in her 9-year-old mind as she worked through the implications. "Was his name James Reynolds?" Mia asked. "How did you know that?" "Because you named me Mia James Chen. You said that James was after a special person who couldn't be with us. And now there's a baby named James, whose father is Christopher Reynolds." Linda marveled at her daughter's deductive reasoning, realizing that Mia had inherited more than just medical aptitude from her father's side of the family. "Yes. Your father was James Reynolds Sr. Christopher is his son from his marriage. So Christopher Reynolds is my half-brother?" "Yes. And I helped deliver my own nephew?" "It appears that way." Mia sat quietly for several more minutes, absorbing this remarkable coincidence. Then she looked up at her mother with the clear, direct gaze that Linda had come to associate with her daughter's most important questions. "Why didn't you tell me the truth before? Why did you let me think he died when I was little?" Linda felt tears beginning to form in her eyes as she prepared to explain decisions that had seemed so clear 18 months ago, but now felt impossibly complicated. "Because your father was married to someone else when you were born, Mia. He had another family, and I thought it would be easier for everyone if we just built our own life here without complications from his other family. But he's dead now," Mia pointed out with 9-year-old logic. "So it wouldn't complicate anything anymore." "You're right," Linda admitted. "I should have told you the truth after he died. I was just scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared that his other family wouldn't want anything to do with us. Scared that you would be hurt if they rejected you. Scared that everything we've built here would change." Mia considered this for a moment. "Are we going to tell Christopher?" Before Linda could answer, the phone rang. She looked at the caller ID and saw a number she didn't recognize, with a Boston area code. "Dr. Chen?" said an unfamiliar male voice when she answered. "My name is Thomas Bradley, and I'm calling on behalf of Christopher Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds would very much like to meet with you to discuss your daughter's heroic actions on Flight 2847. He's extremely grateful for what Mia did, and he'd like the opportunity to thank her properly. Would you be available to meet with him this evening?" Linda looked at Mia, who was watching her mother's face with the keen attention of someone who understood that adult conversations often contained hidden meanings and important information. "Yes," Linda heard herself saying. "I think we need to have that conversation." As she hung up the phone, she realized that the careful life she had built in Boston was about to change forever. The secrets she had kept to protect both Mia and Christopher were about to be revealed, and she could only hope that the truth would bring healing rather than pain to everyone involved. The coffee shop that Thomas Bradley had chosen for the meeting was a small, quiet place in Harvard Square called the Thinking Cup, known for its comfortable seating areas and the kind of privacy that allowed for intimate conversations without interruption. Christopher arrived 15 minutes early, his usual business habit, and chose a corner table where he could see the entrance and where their conversation would be shielded from curious ears. He had spent the afternoon thinking about what he wanted to say, but now that the moment was approaching, he felt completely unprepared for what might unfold. His investigation into Mia Chen had been limited to publicly available information: her mother's employment at Boston Children's Hospital, their address in Cambridge, and basic biographical details that any determined person could find through legitimate means. But even this limited search had yielded one puzzling detail that had been nagging at him since the previous evening. Dr. Linda Chen had moved to Boston from New Orleans in early 2006, according to hospital employment records that were part of the public information required for medical licensing. The timing seemed significant, coming just months after Hurricane Katrina had devastated the city. But what had caught Christopher's attention was a detail in a local newspaper article about the hospital's hiring of experienced nurses to help with an expansion of their pediatric emergency services. The article had mentioned that Dr. Chen had been previously employed at Charity Hospital in New Orleans, and that she had brought with her extensive experience in emergency pediatric care gained during the challenging period following the 2005 hurricane. Christopher's father had been involved in disaster relief efforts following Katrina, donating significant amounts of money and even traveling to New Orleans several times to oversee the company's contributions to rebuilding efforts. Christopher remembered those trips because his father had been deeply affected by what he had seen, and had spoken often about the resilience of the medical professionals who had continued working under impossible conditions. At exactly 6 o'clock, Linda Chen walked through the front door of the coffee shop, and Christopher recognized her immediately, despite never having seen her before. She had the same intelligent dark eyes as Mia, the same calm composure that had allowed her daughter to handle a medical emergency with such remarkable skill. She looked around the room until her gaze settled on Christopher, and he saw a flicker of recognition cross her face as well. "Mr. Reynolds?" she said quietly, extending her hand. "Dr. Chen, thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Christopher stood and shook her hand, struck by how small and delicate it was, yet remembering that these same hands had taught a 9-year-old girl to deliver babies. "Please sit down. Can I get you some coffee or tea?" "Tea would be nice. Thank you." Christopher ordered their beverages, and they sat in silence for a few moments, each trying to decide how to begin a conversation that they both suspected would be more complex than a simple expression of gratitude. Finally, Christopher decided to start with honesty. "Dr. Chen, I want to begin by saying that my family owes you and Mia an enormous debt of gratitude. What your daughter did on that airplane was nothing short of miraculous, and my wife and son are alive today because of her knowledge and courage." "Mia was just doing what I taught her to do," Linda replied modestly. "She has a gift for staying calm under pressure, and she genuinely wants to help people." "About that training," Christopher said carefully, "I'm curious about how a 9-year-old came to have such extensive medical knowledge. It's quite remarkable, and frankly, it's raised some questions that go beyond simple curiosity." Linda studied Christopher's face, looking for signs of what he might already know or suspect. She had been expecting this conversation since Thomas Bradley's phone call, and she had spent the afternoon preparing herself for the possibility that her carefully maintained secrets were about to be revealed. "What kind of questions?" she asked quietly. Christopher leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but not confrontational. "Dr. Chen, when I tried to learn more about you and Mia so that I could properly thank you, I discovered that you moved to Boston from New Orleans in early 2006. My father was involved in Hurricane Katrina relief efforts, and he made several trips to New Orleans during that period. I'm wondering if there's any possibility that your paths might have crossed." Linda felt her heart begin to race as she realized that Christopher was closer to the truth than she had expected. "Your father's name was James Reynolds Sr. Yes, he died 18 months ago from pancreatic cancer." The words hit Linda like a physical blow, even though she already knew about James's death. Hearing it spoken aloud by his son, in the context of their current situation, made the loss feel fresh and immediate again. "Dr. Chen," Christopher said gently, noticing her reaction, "did you know my father?" Linda looked down at her hands, gathering the courage to speak the truth that she had kept hidden for so long. When she looked up again, there were tears in her eyes. "Yes," she said quietly. "I knew your father. We met in New Orleans during the hurricane relief efforts." Christopher felt something shift inside his chest, an intuition that told him this conversation was about to change everything he thought he knew about his family. "In what capacity?" "I was working at Charity Hospital during the storm. The hospital was severely damaged and we were operating under impossible conditions. Your father was coordinating relief supplies and he spent several weeks in the city working with medical facilities to ensure they had what they needed." "And you developed a relationship with him?" Linda nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "We did. He was a remarkable man, Christopher. Compassionate, dedicated, genuinely concerned about helping people. Under normal circumstances, we never would have met. But the hurricane created a situation where people from very different worlds were thrown together." Christopher waited, sensing that there was more to come. "When I discovered I was pregnant," Linda continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "I told James, but I also told him that I didn't want to complicate his life or his marriage. I knew he had a family in Boston, and I didn't want to be the cause of any pain for you or your mother." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge that once crossed would take them both to a place from which they could never return. Christopher felt his world shifting as the implications became clear. "Mia is my father's daughter," he said, not quite a question. "Yes." Even though he had begun to suspect this possibility, hearing it confirmed felt like being struck by lightning. Christopher sat back in his chair, trying to process the reality that he had a half-sister he had never known existed, and that this remarkable little girl who had delivered his son was actually his niece. "Why didn't he tell me?" Christopher asked, his voice filled with pain and confusion. "All these years, why keep it a secret?" "Because I asked him not to," Linda replied, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "I was young and idealistic, and I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping our worlds separate. I thought it would be better if Mia and I built our own life without complications from his other family." "But he supported you? Financially?" Linda nodded. "He insisted on that. He said he wouldn't abandon his responsibility to Mia, even if he couldn't be part of her daily life. He sent money every month until he died, and he also—" She paused, struggling with whether to continue. "What?" "He also sent letters, pictures of you, newspaper articles about your business successes, stories about his life in Boston. He wanted Mia to know about her brother, even if she couldn't meet you." Christopher felt as though the ground beneath him was shifting. "Mia knows about me?" "She knows she has a half-brother named Christopher who lives in Boston and runs a technology company. She's known since she was 6 years old. What she didn't know until yesterday was that you were the same Christopher Reynolds whose son she helped deliver." The irony was overwhelming. Mia had been carrying knowledge of her brother for years, while Christopher had been completely unaware of her existence until 3 days ago. "Does she want to meet me?" Christopher asked. "She's wanted to meet you for years," Linda admitted. "But I kept making excuses, saying it was complicated, that maybe when she was older. The truth is, I was terrified of how you might react, whether you would want anything to do with us." Christopher reached across the table and took Linda's hand. "Linda, I can't speak for how I might have reacted in the past, but I can tell you how I feel right now. Mia is my sister, and she's remarkable. I want her in my life, and I want my son to know his aunt." "Are you sure?" Linda asked. "This isn't just gratitude talking? Once we cross this line, there's no going back. Mia will be part of your life permanently." "I'm absolutely sure," Christopher said firmly. "And Linda, I need you to know that I don't blame you for the decisions you made. You were trying to protect everyone, including me. But now that I know the truth, I want to make sure Mia knows she's loved and wanted by her brother." Linda felt years of carefully maintained emotional walls beginning to crumble. She had spent so long protecting Mia from potential rejection and disappointment that she had never allowed herself to hope that James's other family might actually welcome them with open arms. "There's something else," Christopher said. "The financial support that my father was providing. I want to continue that, but I want to increase it significantly, and I want to set up a college fund for Mia. If she's already this remarkable at 9 years old, I can only imagine what she'll accomplish as she gets older. Christopher, that's very generous, but we've managed fine on our own. It's not generosity, Christopher interrupted. It's family responsibility. My father should have been able to acknowledge Mia publicly, should have made sure she knew she had a brother who cared about her. I can't change the past, but I can make sure the future is different. What about Victoria? Linda asked. How will she feel about suddenly having a sister-in-law and a 9-year-old niece? Christopher smiled. Victoria is going to love Mia. She's already convinced that your daughter is some kind of angel sent to help us. When she finds out that Mia is family, she's going to be thrilled. And you'll tell her everything? About James and me? About why we kept it secret? Absolutely. No more secrets. Mia is James's aunt, and she's going to be part of his life from the very beginning. As they left the coffee shop that evening, both Linda and Christopher felt as though they were stepping into a completely new chapter of their lives. The secret that had been kept for nearly a decade had finally been revealed. But instead of causing the pain and disruption that Linda had feared, it was opening the door to healing, connection, and the expansion of their family in ways that none of them could have anticipated. The little girl who had brought one life into the world was about to discover that she had gained not just a nephew, but a brother, a sister-in-law, and a place in a family that she had only known about through letters and photographs. The extraordinary events of Flight 2847 had been the catalyst, but the connections that were being forged would last for generations. 3 days later, on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in October, Mia Chen stood on the front steps of the Reynolds family home in Back Bay, holding her mother's hand and carrying a small gift bag containing a hand-knitted blanket that she and Linda had worked on together throughout the previous evening. She wore her best dress, a deep purple color that complemented her dark hair, and despite her usual composure, she seemed nervous about this first meeting with her half-brother and his family. Are you ready for this, sweetheart? Linda asked, squeezing her daughter's hand gently. I think so, Mia replied, though her voice carried a slight tremor that hadn't been present during the airplane emergency. What if they don't like me? What if they think I'm weird because I know so much about medical stuff? Mia, they're going to love you, Linda assured her. Christopher has been looking forward to this meeting ever since we talked at the coffee shop, and Victoria already thinks you're a hero. Before Mia could respond, the front door opened to reveal Christopher Reynolds, tall, well-dressed, with the same intelligent eyes that Mia had inherited from their father. For a moment, both siblings simply stared at each other, taking in the reality of this meeting that had been 18 months in the making since James's death, and years in the making since Mia first learned she had a brother. Mia, Christopher said softly, kneeling down to her eye level. I'm Christopher. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you. I know who you are, Mia replied with a small smile. Daddy sent me pictures of you. You look just like him. The simple, direct statement hit Christopher with unexpected emotional force. This little girl had been carrying knowledge of their shared father, while he had been completely unaware of her existence. I'm sorry I didn't know about you sooner. If I had known, I would have wanted to meet you years ago. Mom said it was complicated, Mia said with the matter-of-fact acceptance that seemed to characterize her approach to difficult situations. But we're meeting now, and that's what matters. Christopher stood and embraced Linda briefly. Thank you for bringing her. Thank you for trusting us with this. As they entered the house, Victoria appeared from the living room with baby James in her arms. When she saw Mia, she immediately knelt down, careful not to disturb the sleeping infant. Mia, Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. I will never be able to thank you enough for what you did for us. You gave me my son and you saved both our lives. How is James doing? Mia asked, immediately focusing on the medical aspects of the situation. Has he had any breathing problems? Sometimes babies born at 36 weeks need extra monitoring. Victoria exchanged a glance with Christopher, both of them amazed at the 9-year-old's continued medical knowledge and professional concern. He's been perfect. The doctor said the delivery was textbook, and his lungs are completely developed. May I hold him? Mia asked quietly. Of course, Victoria said, carefully transferring the baby to his aunt's arms. As Mia looked down at her nephew, this tiny person whose life had begun under her care, she felt a sense of completion and rightness that she couldn't fully explain. The baby she had helped bring into the world was her own family, connected to her by bonds that went far deeper than the extraordinary circumstances of his birth. "Hello, James," she whispered to the baby, who had opened his eyes and seemed to be studying her face. "I'm your Aunt Mia. I was there when you came into the world, and I'm going to be here as you grow up too." Christopher and Linda watched this interaction with tears in their eyes, understanding that they were witnessing the beginning of a relationship that would shape both children's lives for years to come. The airplane emergency that had brought them together had revealed connections that went far deeper than chance or coincidence. "Mia," Christopher said, settling into a chair across from where she sat with the baby, "there are some things I want you to know about our father and about our family." Mia looked up from James, giving Christopher her full attention. "First, I want you to know that he loved you very much. Your mother showed me some of the letters he wrote to you over the years, and it's clear that you were one of the most important things in his life." "I know," Mia said simply. "Mom read me his letters. He said he was proud of me and that someday I would meet my big brother and we would be a real family." "That's what I want too," Christopher said. "But I also want you to understand that this isn't charity or obligation. You're my sister, and James is your nephew, and that makes you part of our family permanently. Not because of what you did on the airplane, but because of who you are." Victoria nodded in agreement. "Mia, I want you to know that you're welcome in our home anytime. I want James to grow up knowing his aunt, and I want us to be part of each other's lives." "What about your other family?" Mia asked with the directness that characterized her approach to complex situations. "Your parents and siblings? Will they want to know about me?" Christopher and Victoria exchanged glances. "My mother died 6 years ago," Christopher explained gently. "And I don't have any other siblings. You're my only sister, Mia. As for extended family, we'll introduce you gradually, but I want you to know that you belong here. There's something else," Victoria added. "We want you to be James's godmother. If something ever happened to Christopher and me, we want to know that James would be cared for by someone who loves him and who was there from the very beginning of his life." Mia's eyes widened with surprise and honor. "Really? You want me to be his godmother?" "We can't think of anyone more qualified," Christopher said with a smile. "You literally brought him into the world. Who better to help guide him through life?" As the afternoon progressed and the two families shared their first meal together, they began to understand that sometimes the most extraordinary events are simply the universe's way of bringing people back to where they belong. The conversation flowed easily, with Mia asking thoughtful questions about James's development and care, and Christopher and Victoria sharing stories about their pregnancy and their hopes for their son's future. "Mia," Linda said during a quiet moment, "how do you feel about all of this? About having a brother and a sister-in-law and a nephew?" Mia considered the question with the same thoughtfulness she brought to everything. "It feels right," she said finally, "like pieces of a puzzle fitting together. I always wondered what it would be like to have a big family, and now I do." "And you're comfortable with Christopher and Victoria being part of our lives?" "More than comfortable," Mia replied. "Happy." As the evening drew to a close and Linda prepared to take Mia home, Christopher pulled his sister aside for a private conversation. "Mia, I want you to know that things are going to change for us now. Good changes. I'm going to make sure you have everything you need for school, for your medical interest, for whatever dreams you want to pursue. And I want you to think of this house as your second home." "Thank you," Mia said seriously. "But Christopher, I don't need things to be different because you feel guilty about not knowing about me before. I just want us to be brother and sister." Christopher was struck once again by his sister's wisdom and emotional intelligence. "You're absolutely right. No guilt, no obligation, just family." "Just family," Mia agreed, giving him a hug that felt natural and right, despite their short acquaintance. As Linda and Mia walked to their car that evening, both mother and daughter felt as though they were leaving behind one chapter of their lives and beginning another. The secrets that had shaped their existence for so long had been replaced by openness, acceptance, and love. "Mom," Mia said as they drove through the Boston streets toward their Cambridge apartment. "Do you think Daddy would be happy about today?" Linda smiled, thinking about James Reynolds Sr. and his letters expressing hope that someday his two families would find each other. "I think he would be thrilled, sweetheart. I think this is exactly what he always wanted." "Good," Mia said, settling back in her seat with the satisfaction of someone who had found her place in the world. "Because I really like having a big brother. And I love being Aunt Mia." Years later, when James Christopher Reynolds was old enough to understand the full story of his birth, he would learn that the person who had brought him safely into the world was not just a random stranger who happened to be on the same airplane, but his own aunt, a remarkable young woman who had been trained by life and love to step forward when others stepped back, to act when others were paralyzed, and to bring healing and hope to situations that seemed impossible. And Mia Chen, who grew up to become the youngest person ever admitted to Harvard Medical School, and eventually became one of the country's leading pediatric cardiac surgeons, would always remember the day when she learned that helping others wasn't just about doing the right thing. It was about understanding that we are all connected in ways we might never fully understand, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply be brave enough to step forward when someone needs us. The airplane that had carried them all into the sky that autumn afternoon had brought them back to Earth as a family, bound together by courage, love, and the extraordinary understanding that heroes really do come in all sizes, especially the smallest ones. But more than that, it had proven that sometimes fate works in the most unexpected ways to bring families together, to heal old wounds, and to create new beginnings from the most unlikely circumstances. In the years that followed, Mia would never miss one of James's birthdays, and every October the family would celebrate not just the day he was born, but the day that changed all their lives forever. The story of Flight 2847 would become family legend, told and retold to friends and extended family as an example of how courage, knowledge, and love can triumph over fear and uncertainty. And baby James, as he grew into a thoughtful and compassionate young man, would carry with him the knowledge that he had entered the world under the care of the bravest person he would ever know, his Aunt Mia, who had shown him from his very first breath that sometimes the smallest hands can accomplish the greatest things.